Okay, so today what we're going to look at is simple binary form, starting to look at how do phrases not only just group into periods and phrase groups, but how do these periods and phrase groups build the form of an entire piece. And we're going to start with the Bach Minuet in G minor from the Anna Magdalena Bach Notebook, which is a collection of pieces that were written principally by J.S. Bach, but also we presume by other members of his family, and were used as teaching pieces within the Bach family as they learned to play harpsichord. So as you listen to the Minuet in G minor, I've let the cat out of the bag. It is in G minor, but what I would like you to listen for is where does it modulate to, when and where does it modulate, and then where are the cadences and how many phrases do we have and what types of cadences do we find at the ends of each phrase. You might want to listen to the example once or twice, 3 times maybe, just to make sure that you can figure out as much of that as possible, and then we'll check it with a diagram that I have to show afterwards. But see how much of it you can figure out by yourself. If you want to listen to the piece again, feel free to go back to the beginning. Again, just try to figure out as much of the modulation and cadences and phrase structure as you can. I'm going to go ahead and talk about that now. Okay. So what I have here is a diagram for the first half. You might have noticed that we have 32 bars, and basically the piece is in what we call binary form, 2 parts, because each of the 16 bar halves are repeated. And then there's also some important characteristics of each that define binary form, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's look at the cadences of the first 8 bars. Okay, so you have da dee da dee dum 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 da 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 dum. This is sort of the this long note here, and ending on a 5 chord in the key of G minor. This is a half cadence, but this marks the first cadence in the piece. It is a 4-bar phrase, and again for the Baroque and classical period, not every phrase is 4 bars, but in this type of Baroque piece, and then throughout the classical period, 4-bar phrases are the norm. And so not surprising that we would find a cadence here in measure 4, and being in the key of G minor and ending on 2 Ds, B flat here is a passing tone. The other notes of this measure are part of the dominant chords. This is a half cadence. And then 4 bars later, again with this dotted half note, we have sort of a rhythmic repose in the end of the second phrase, also a D major chord. So what I've started to mark in the diagram here is we have 4 bars to a half cadence, another 4 bars to a half cadence. As we look at the next 8 bars, let me get to them. Here we go. Okay, starting in G minor, right? But by the end of this phrase, and we're ending on a half cadence again here, 4 bars later in measure 12. You might notice we start to get some B naturals, but they are canceled out by B flat by the end of the phrase. So they're temporary. We're not modulating to a key with the B natural, but they are signals that we're starting to use some chromaticism in chords from other keys to create a sense of modulation. And when we end on a big B flat chord here at the end of measure 16, preceded by the F chord 5-1, ending on scale degree 1 in the key of B flat, we have modulated to the key of B flat, and this is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B flat. So as we look at these first 4 phrases, half cadence in G minor, half cadence in G minor, half cadence in G minor, modulate to a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B flat. So we have 3 weak indecisive cadences ending with the strong conclusive cadence here in phrase 4. When you have 4 phrases that you don't get the conclusive cadence until the end of phrase 4, that creates what we call a double period structure. 4 phrases that create the double period. The first 2 phrases create an antecedent pair, or the first half of the double period. The second phrases create the consequent pair, or the second half of that double period. And then we actually modulate to B flat at the end. The modulation from G minor to B flat is not unexpected. When we start in a minor key in the Baroque period or in the classical period, we tend to modulate to the relative major, which is what we do here. Okay, so there are the cadences and phrase structure for the first half. If any of that doesn't make sense, or you have questions about that, or it's not what you came up with yourself, let me know and let's talk about that, but make sure that that sinks in. Okay, and then here is the phrase structure for the second half, and we'll look back at the music and start looking at cadences for the second half, which probably gets us to about... Here we go. So here is, starting in measure 17, the next 8 bars of the and first part of the second half. We're starting in B flat major, which is where we ended. We do get some E naturals. They are canceled out in this next phrase, and we end back on a B flat chord here. So ending on this F chord in measure 20 would be a half cadence in the key of B flat. We don't actually modulate to the F. The E naturals are what we call secondary dominants, the 5 of 5. And we'll talk more about that in some future lectures. But since we're staying in B flat for these 2 phrases, and this F chord would be 5 in B flat, we're going to go ahead and define this as a half cadence in B flat, right? And then we end on 5-1 with scale degree 1 in the soprano here. This is perfect authentic cadence in B flat. So half cadence in B flat followed by perfect authentic cadence in B flat. That would create a typical 2-phrase period, right? Weak cadence followed by a conclusive perfect authentic cadence here. These 2 phrases are an antecedent and consequent in the key of B flat, half cadence, perfect authentic. Okay. In the next 8 bars, B naturals, F sharps, things are a little unstable in terms of some chromatic pitches, even an E natural here at the end. This is actually when we start to modulate back to the key of G minor, right? We have G minor going to D major here. This is 1 to 5 now in the key of G minor. The F sharp, of course, is the raised leading tone in the key of G minor. That's not chromatic to G minor because we can't raise scale degree 7 in the key of G minor, particularly for dominant function chords, which is what we're doing here. And that's why we get that note. But this is a half cadence now in the key of G minor. This is a little interesting because he's sort of implying D here. The E flat doesn't quite work. He wants the F sharp because this is a 5 chord, and he doesn't like the sound of the E flat here. But normally, of course, in descending patterns in a minor key, we would see both scale degree 7 and 6 lowered. Here they still are raised. And then, of course, they are raised here ascending as we would more expect. But I think because he's implying the D major chord, he didn't want the F natural here. Just didn't work harmonically. And so he kept the E natural even on the descending pattern, which is a little interesting. The E natural, of course, is canceled out by E flat because that's a temporary raised scale degree 6. We're still in the key of G minor, raised 7 at the end, 5-1 with scale degree 1. So half cadence in G minor, having modulated in this phrase to perfect authentic cadence in the key of G minor here. And this is a diagram of that second half. Okay, so modulation, half cadence in G minor, perfect authentic cadence, weak cadence followed by conclusive strong cadence. This is an antecedent, consequent, and period structure for these two bars. So the first half is a double period. The second half is two phrase periods. So a little bit different structure just in terms of the double period and then the two single periods here. But this does create, or this does show the phrase structure for the two halves. I'll reduce this here so you can kind of see all of this. Hopefully that shows up in the on your screen okay. Not quite let me do it the way I want to, but there we go. Okay, so simple binary form, a first half that modulates and cadences to a new key. So the A section, just as we would expect in simple binary form, starts in G minor, modulates to B flat major, and again the minor to the relative major is a typical modulation scheme in the broken classical period. If this were in G major, we would have expected a modulation to D major, the dominant, at the end of the A section. In binary form, the B section, second half, begins in the new key, so we start in B flat, and then we modulate back within the second half and end in the original key, which we have here. Okay, and this is in the essence of binary form. An A section, first half that modulates to a new key, a B section that starts in the new key and modulates back. That's what we call simple binary form. We will look next time at what's called rounded binary form, which has to do with a theme from the first half repeated in the second half. We don't have that here, so this is just simple binary form, and that's something we'll talk about next time. What I want you to do as an assignment now is to write a simple binary form, but the good news is you're already halfway done. In writing your modulating period in the previous lesson, you're going to use that as the first half of your binary form. So that's the A section of your binary form. And if you remember back the previous lesson, this is the modulating period example that I wrote for the previous lesson 4. So I've made that now my A section, and now I'm going to add a modulating period back for my B section. And then I now have a simple binary form. Okay, I'll go to Finale here. I have it and can play it and let you hear it. So here's my previous modulating period. So starting in G major, half cadence, and then modulating with the C sharp period in to D major, perfect authentic cadence. So starting in D major for the second half, imperfect authentic cadence in D, introducing the C naturals to modulate back to the key of G, and ending on a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G. So this is what I want you to do for your assignment is to write now a modulating period for the second half of a simple binary form using the previous one that you wrote as your first half of your simple binary form. Again, I would suggest lead with melody. Write the melody first. Let your ear sort of find a good melody that you like. In the second phrase likely is where you'll want to modulate back. Technically, you could do it in the first phrase. You could modulate back to your original key within the first phrase. Doesn't have to be the second phrase, but somewhere within these two phrases, you have to start introducing the accidentals that bring you back to the previous key. So having modulated from G to D, which implies C sharps, I now need to get C naturals to come back to bring us to the key of G, and I'll go ahead and give you a hint. If you're going from major to the dominant in modulating, it is scale degree 4 that will have to be lowered coming back into your original major key, and that scale degree will be part of the 5/7 chord in your original key. So really all I had to do was write a melody that then figured out how do I move convincingly to this C natural to bring us back to the key of G. That will be my 5/7 chord. And so I then looked at Alberti bass and figured out each harmony. It's really quite simple. 1, 1, 5, 7, 1 in the key of D, and then 5, 7, 1, 5, 7, 1 in the key of G. Okay? See how you do. Let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing your simple binary form.